Must be YouTube, yeah.
It's not working well.
Well, I'm like trying to replay the last part of the stream, and it's just like
It was kind of it kept buffering over and over. That's why I kept thinking it was my internet going out.
see if this one. Oh yeah, like look
It's
at it right now. Like
not working well.
well, I'm like trying. Like it's just like a green screen.
Oh, dude,
You see that?
we've elevated. We've become the green screen. I actually don't see that.
Like if you go to YouTube, like if you because I stopped it and started again, like it's just
Oh, that's why.
it's just like a green screen.
Yep, I see that.
I don't know if let me see if that's the case. It's gonna suck, but we can always.
Yeah, it's looking pretty down at the moment.
Just make sure they didn't post anything. That is so weird. I'm just gonna fix it. See live.
Going live.
Okay. So let's see.
See green. I see green screens again.
Oh gosh, dang it. Oh wait.
Oob.
This is just a kick in the gonads right now.
Yeah, dude, they didn't want us to win today. Yeah, it's green screen for me.
All right, well let's just record. And
then record it.
And then we can just put out segments.
All right, let's do it.
Where were we? Cavaliers. We did a little bit of it
already. Yeah, we did most of it. It's up to you. Do you want to do it again or just move on to the next thing? We probably should move on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunate.
That's okay. Let's go with Harden. Or Joe.
Let's do it. I'll let you take the lead, my boy.
Alrighty. So I do apologize if you guys are watching this segment. Unfortunately, the YouTube live stream just did not want us to win today. And so we will be recording video segments, and of course, did not want us to win today. And so we will be recording video segments, and of course, we'll put these out throughout the week. Probably going to put out the Summer League studs first, but before we talk about those guys, we're going to talk about this Joel Embiid, hoping that James Harden will mindset can be changed to stay with the 76ers. So here's what the article goes on to say. I believe he had an interview with Rachel Nichols on Showtime. I think is what her new show is on. But let's read what he said. Joel Embiid was asked by Rachel Nichols over the weekend at Vegas Summer League for his reaction to James Harden opting into his contract with the 76ers with the intention of being traded away. Joel Embiid said he's disappointed, but then again, I also understand it's a business. People make decisions. I'm more appreciative of the way he handled the whole situation. We're going to be boys forever. Want him to come back, obviously, so we can go out and accomplish what we want, which is to win a championship. So hopefully his mindset can be changed. But other than that, I'm happy to be his friend. We're close. We've grown since he got here, and that's what I'm close. We've grown since he got here, and that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited to keep that friendship for the rest of our lives. the 76ers and Harden have been going on through a stalemate because they obviously want to trade him away. But James Harden, with the player option, opted in, and they're hoping to be traded. But the 76ers are hoping that he'll come back. Pete, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, Pete. I'm not a huge fan of I would say Joel, or not Joel Embiid, sorry, but of James Harden. I think that he is kind of shown that he is not conducive to winning basketball, and so he's kind of shown me what type of player he is. And going back to the trade even more, I think it's a lose-lose for both teams. But that's just my quick synopsis of it. Pete, what do you think about this whole thing? I mean, is it a good look for Joel Embiid? Is it a bad look for James Harden? What do you think is the thing that we're noticing here?
All right, let me ask you a few questions before I give you my answer. One, James Harden was your favorite basketball player at one point, wasn't he? Am I wrong?
You're wrong. He was never there.
Was he up there though? Didn't you really like Harden?
I think I liked
Is
him
it
in
a lefty
OKC,
game?
maybe OKC, but that was really it.
Hmm. Okay, okay. I'm just misremembering, I think, with a different player. Um, and as far as when you said a lose-lose, are you talking about the James Harden Ben Simmons trade?
Yeah.
Nah, dude, it still isn't a lose-lose because Harden is still worth more. Even if they sold him for 40 cents on the dollar, that's more than they'd be getting for Ben Simmons. I mean, honestly, they would Ben Simmons might never play basketball again. At the very least, James Harden is, a close to max player who is going to get you somebody you probably don't want, but you'd rather have than Ben Simmons. So I'm still saying there's no way it's not a win for the Sixers on that trade. But being said, yeah, man. I mean, this is Harden, though. I mean, I honestly don't understand why people expect anything less from him. At this point, this is the guy. He's been this way his whole career, pretty much. In Houston, we saw what happened the Corey Brewer, Josh Smith game. I mean, he's sitting on the bench with a towel on his head while his team comes back from a deficit that he helped create, against the Clippers.
Right.
This is really what the guy is like. He wants it the easy way. He wants it to be convenient to him so he can live his life outside of basketball while also being treated like he's one of the game's best.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately for him, that's really not how it works once you get into your 30s for anybody.
Yeah.
Like, really anybody. You have to absolutely grind day in and day out to keep your body at the same level of a 24-year-old. Especially in the NBA when you have guys like, Scoot Henderson coming in. Scoot Henderson is an absolute physical freak. And that's counting the work he's putting in on top of it. What's James Harden going to do if Scoot Henderson's in front of him? He's going to be 10 steps behind him before he even turns around. That being said, yeah, man, I don't know. I think this is an L for Joel Embiid in the sense that if he really truly wants to win, which honestly, Bernie, I'm not convinced of for him either.
Yeah. I mean,
if he really wants to win, he should look in the mirror or talk to people around him and understand that James Harden clearly is not the guy. James Harden clearly does not want it as bad as it seems like Joel Embiid is pretending to want it. But yeah, man, I don't know what to do with this situation. It's really an ugly mess because I think there's a litany of errors on all sides. I think
yeah.
Philly probably should have just given him a slightly longer extension last year
Mm-hmm.
instead of letting him pick the thing up and take the discount where he could then, claim he was doing it for the team and, get that chip on his shoulder financially, right?
Yeah.
But also, he made a mistake. James made a mistake. He seemed, and this is just my read on the situation, Bernie. You could tell me if you think I'm wrong. It seemed like he really thought Houston was going to come get him. From everything the way it was playing out, it seemed like that was going to be the case. And then as we've heard, some of these little news, snippets and buzz around is that Ime ended up saying, no, we don't want James Harden, which, surprise, surprise, a coach that likes to get the best out of players and challenge guys doesn't want the guy who's unchallengeable to work harder, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense to me, which then led to James getting, snippy or whatever it was and instantly opting into this, player option, the $35 million player option, which means he's now going to have to play at a discount again going into his 35-year-old season, I believe, or his 34-year-old season. That's a huge L. He could have gotten a longer contract, possibly. He might have been easier to trade if he hadn't done that. But it seemed like he just made a rash decision of, I'm upset with everybody right now. Let me lock in my 35 mil. If nobody wants to give me 4 for 120 or whatever he was looking for, which I don't think is what he was looking for, um, here's my 35. Trade me and figure it out. But nobody, who's trading for him? I mean, it's
Hmm.
three team trade requests in 3 seasons, and none of it has looked good anywhere he's been really, barring few week stretches here and there. So I hate it. I honestly think he's going to end up playing with Philly again.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, Bernie, and I hate to it's actually this works out seeing as our first segment, YouTube undercut us on that first vid.
Hmm.
Um, I can bring the Knicks back up guilt free. Really, this is great for teams like the Knicks. If James Harden goes back to Philadelphia, it's a beautiful thing. Because not only is it good in terms of you, in my opinion, have to worry about them less in postseason games, but really, I think it's just going to spell a quicker exit for Joel Embiid from Philly. I think he's going to want to get out of there if he goes another season and, they bomb in the second round or the first round or whatever it is, which
Yeah.
I think is inevitably the plan with, or that's not the plan, but that's just what's going to happen with James Harden. So, as a New York fan, I'm hoping James Harden goes back there. As just a basketball fan, I wish he wouldn't, but it seems like he's going to. What do you think, Bernie? Where do you think he ends up?
I mean, it's a tough one to say because, like you said, it's kind of like what team really is going to trade for him? What team is really going to want to commit that much money to a guy that doesn't really is not really conducive on winning? And that's the tough
Mm-hmm.
part to convince any team because again, like I know the players' mo is to make money, and I have no problems with that. But just like the players are trying to make their money, I think that the owners are and the GMs are trying to win, right? That's how
Yep.
they earn their money. So it's kind of one of those things where I think there is some options for him. I think the Clippers could potentially trade for
Yeah.
him just
That's
to
the best team option,
kind
in
of
my
kind
opinion.
of freshen up what they have going on there in LA. I think the Knicks maybe, but at the same time, like you said, like
Mm-mm.
you don't want to commit that much money to a guy that doesn't lead to wins in the playoffs. And I think that's going to be a situation where the 76ers also have to look at themselves and say, "Dang, we may have made a mistake." Not to say that they shouldn't have traded Ben Simmons for James Harden, because I think that at the end of the day, that's probably the best deal that they could get. Um,
Well, you really should have taken the Halliburton deal because that was out there. I mean, we all know that. I feel like that was confirmed. The Indiana Pacers offered Halliburton and somebody else for Ben, which that's a huge L.
yeah,
That's what they needed.
exactly. And so, I think for Embiid, I think like you said, I think he's another guy that needs to look himself in the mirror and say like, how am I going to get to the NBA Finals? I mean, we talked about his weight and his injuries being kind of the biggest concerns about Joel Embiid, and he needs to look himself in the mirror, like you said, and say like, we have to do better in these. I have to do better in these areas because, I understand like the food is good, and food can just like alcohol and drugs can be just as addicting. Not to compare the three of them together, but in terms of food in general, I think that is kind of some, I think most Americans' biggest vices. I won't lie and say
Mm,
that it's one of mine too. Um, just in terms of like eating healthier. Obviously you don't have to eat the healthiest, but healthier. I just think that's kind of what has led to these Joel Embiid injuries. That and also I would say the egregious flopping is another one for me.
mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, man, it is a disappointing, I would say, situation to monitor. Going back to James Harden, like again, like I think that he's a good player. I think that he does a lot of good things. Um, but at the same time, does he lead to winning basketball? And the answer is no. And I think that's what a lot of these teams have to look themselves and say, like, if we bring this guy on, is he going to help us win games? And if he's not going to do that, if he's not going to help you win a championship, more so, is he going to help you win a championship? And I think a lot of people will say no. And I think that's true. I think that, James Harden probably took the biggest L because he opted in and is probably not guaranteeing himself the most money um, long
Yeah,
term wise.
That was the worst thing he could have done in terms of getting actual money for a few years from now. Because now it really rides on this year. Like he's really gonna have to show up wherever he goes if he wants any decent contract. I mean, yeah, he this was just a colossal L on all fronts. Because really, in my opinion, the Sixers should have started looking to move him sooner. As soon as those Houston rumors came around,
Yeah.
and that stuff doesn't, it usually doesn't come from nowhere. And I think when it's a guy like Harden, who it's just constantly like, what's this guy gonna do next? It seems even more believable, you know? Yeah, you just this this opens up a conversation that I don't really want to go too deep into, Bernie, but I think it's worth bringing up just briefly. And it's Daryl Morey, the GM, the basketball GM. I would argue, if not Danny Ainge, he's the most controversial basketball opinion maybe ever.
Yeah.
Is it actually? That's probably not true. It's either Presti or maybe oh, dude, what was the guy? The process. Why am I forgetting his name?
Oh,
The 76ers guy. You know who I'm
yeah.
talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Regardless, the process, the original trust the process guy. Let me get to my point here. Daryl Morey. I think there's a lot of discussion as if Daryl Morey is a
Sam
terrible
Hinkie.
GM. Sam Hinkie, thank you, Sam Hinkie. He's the most controversial. There's a few other ones, maybe Palinka,
Yeah.
but Morey is definitely in that top five, six most controversial GMs.
Yeah.
Most people, I feel like the public perception of Daryl Morey is very 50-50 polarized. People either think he's one of the best GMs or one of the worst GMs. In my opinion, it's crazy to say he's one of the worst. With the amount of success in multiple places, with the amount of people he manages to get onto his teams,
Yeah.
he's definitely a great GM. But, and here's the biggest but, Bernie, his affinity for James Harden is it's self-sabotage. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty close. The funniest comparison, and it's probably the most accurate comparison, is how KD feels about Kyrie. You know, this is a almost a toxic relationship from the outside looking in, just in terms of the
Hmm.
professional side of it.
Yeah.
But they just can't quit each other, you know?
Yeah.
And I think Maury
Well
has
put.
really tied so much of his success and his public persona and just his accolades as a GM to James Harden. And man, for a smart guy, what a mistake. There's so many ways he
Yeah.
could have taken it. So much potential in terms of, if he had gotten there, Bernie, and we talked about this to death. If he had gotten there and, I know he stepped in after the Ben Simmons, Doc Rivers, Joel Embiid blow up after the Hawks series, but if he
Hmm.
had had the chance to take Ben Simmons with the value he had before that, I honestly think the 76ers team would have won a championship by now. Because I don't think he would have kept Ben Simmons regardless. It's all hypotheticals. It's just a
Yeah.
very interesting situation because now I think Philly is in one of the most precarious places of all the potential finals championship caliber teams. I think they're the most precarious. Uh, Business wise, the Lakers are probably the most precarious injury wise, but Philly is business because James Harden already doesn't want to be there.
Yeah.
But Joel is literally right there, man. I mean, one big mistake and he's gonna ask. And somebody will send a crazy offer for him because he's not Dame Lillard who's 35 and making 60 million. I know he's not 35, he's 33. But Joel Embiid is a guy who gets mega offers, and if he asks to leave, somebody will come and do anything they can. And unfortunately for them, the Knicks have a lot of connections with Joel Embiid. So if I'm the Sixers, I'm doing anything I can to make Embiid happy. But you have to balance that out with a winning culture, and they have not managed to find that.
Yeah. I mean,
Not
I just
championships, I should say. They have a winning culture. They win seasons, regular seasons. They're
yeah.
top of the league, but
Yeah, but those don't win championships, unfortunately for them.
exactly,
And I think
they might as well be worthless.
that's kind of the issue I have with the 76ers is just this loser mentality that they've kept since they started the process. And it started with Joel Embiid. Not saying that he has a loser's mentality, but I will say that I think that the former regime of the 76ers
Yeah.
instilled the loser mentality that stuck to all of these players. And guys including Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Markel Fultz, like the guys that they drafted, Nerlens Noel, like so on and so forth, Jahlil Okafor, like all the players that have been drafted beforehand,
Yep.
the losing mentality of trying to tank for the best teams has theoretically shown, maybe not even theoretically, it's shown that that doesn't work. It never has and it never will. I think that what it really kind of shows is that like when you have, and I think we talked about a lot with I can't remember the coach's name. Was it Brown? Mike Brown? No, not Mike Brown.
Which
What's
one?
the
The one
former
that was the
70s?
coach of the Sixers?
Yeah,
That was oh man, what was his name? His name was Brett Brown.
Brett
Brett
Brown.
Brute. Yeah.
Brett Brown. Like he is another guy that they again, it kind of goes to me like it kind of goes hand in hand with Joel Embiid stuff. They kept him on as the coach because he endured the process, but I felt like he got comfortable. I felt like a lot of
He's
these guys
terrible.
I feel like a lot of these guys just get too comfortable with where they were just a couple years back, and when you don't, it's just kind of like having a kid, and then you wonder like why he's such a jerk bag, a dirt bag, or like a jerk when he's like in his teens or adulthood. Is because you raised him or you raised the culture of losing mentality, of not having a winner's mentality. When you
Hmm.
do that, it leads to bad play. Even if you do win the regular season, to me, it's about building those moments so these players, just like Joel Embiid, just like James Harden, can handle the pressure situations in the playoffs. Because again, it is intense. It's supposed to be the most intense basketball any player in the world should be playing is the NBA playoff basketball. Obviously, the NBA finals are a step above that, but
Sure.
they're
Got to
included.
go through the playoffs first, though.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's part of the learning curve. And honestly, Bernie, I think the writing was on the wall the second. And again, this is literally zero defense of Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is one of the most, uh, dude, just disappointing human beings of all time. Like the fact that you can have that, I'll never not be um, a hater of people who have that much potential and just such an unwillingness to just step out of their comfort zone, man. Like you've been given it all. Go chase it like so
yeah.
many people in your position would.
Hmm.
That being said, the second that they lost that Atlanta the Hawks, I almost said Atlanta Falcons, that Atlanta Hawks series in 2020, I believe,
Yeah.
and the whole team dogpiles on Ben Simmons and just throws him under the bus. It's like whether or not it was his fault, which it wasn't all his fault. He missed a dunk. I mean, he skipped out on a dunk. He was not good, but he was not the only person who did not play well in that series. But the fact that they had a
Hmm.
culture where the head coach, the best player, these guys are directly calling out another guy on their team. That stuff doesn't get fixed by trading the guy they called out.
Yeah.
Doesn't. They were mentally a weak team, deep, deeply rooted outside of just Ben Simmons, and it's shown for years now. I mean, they finally. This team really is just a tragedy of errors because they always make choices way too early or way too late. It's one way or the other. Never get the timing just right because they waited way too long with Ben to trade him. They waited way too long to fire Brett Brown. They waited way too long to fire Doc
Doc
Rivers,
Rivers.
so
Yeah.
on and yes, so on and so forth. It's every single time they
Hmm.
let the process go on too long with Sam Hinkie. You can do that. It can't be 10 years. It can't be.
Yeah.
'Cause then what do you have? What happens to the year 1 through 6 guys? They're worthless. You just wasted your time and their time. Yeah, this team has so much soul searching to do. I do really like Nick Nurse for them as their coach. Some of the things they've already been saying, like, did you hear Maxi recently said?
What do you say?
He recently said something. I'm not going to say it verbatim. I don't know where the article is, but he was talking about the difference between, or the difference is just having Nick Nurse there, and the fact that he was Nick Nurse is already like he'll stop like runs and stuff to like coach players up and try and get them in the right position and stuff. And Tyrese Maxey was like, basically, he's like, yeah, that's nice to have that. We've never really done that before. I was just like, what? Like, so you weren't being coached? Like, what? You didn't have anybody stopping to like tell you, hey, maybe let's try this thing next play or whatever. Like, I just thought it was really funny. It's like we kind of all knew that about Doc, but hearing guys like Maxi, where it's not necessarily like I didn't get the vibe he was throwing a hit piece out on Doc, like what an awful coach. It's more like remember when he early last season, you and I got in a uproar about this, not with each other, but just we were befuddled how
Mm-hmm.
Tyrese Maxey basically said Doc Rivers was like he had to tell Doc to run pick and roll with Joel Embiid. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you kidding me? What are you talking about? It's so look at Denver. Just if you run that play with a guy like Joel Embiid, it's a bucket. It's guaranteed buckets. So the fact that they have a much better coach, I like it. It's just my favorite word for basketball teams, bro.
What the roster's going to look like, don't know anything. You don't know. It's the offseason, but it seemed like he has an idea. He has a plan. He has a vision, and he's going to push us to try to get the best of whoever's on his team. So it sounds like to me, like you said, like Nick Nurse, obviously being one of the better coaches in the league, having a game plan for using, I would say, both Maxey and Embiid in the way that he would like him to. I think for Nick Nurse, it's going to be a situation where I'm curious to see if he likes James Harden as a player or not. But what I will say is going to be good for the 76ers moving forward is that, like you said, they're going to have a no-nonsense coach that is, like you said, going to stop practice, is going to be a guy that is going to really focus in and hone in on what he wants his main two guys scoring actions to be, and the rest of the guys will follow suit. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's gonna be interesting to kind of monitor the situation and continue to look at it. But at the end of the day, I think that the 76ers are in a better spot than they were a couple years back, but they still have a lot of cleaning up to do, and that's of course being the James Harden situation and figuring out, um, what they want to do with that, because I think it is a tough. It's going to be a tough one just because you don't know about some of these guys.
I ask you a question, last one before we move to our next topic. Maybe this is a stupid question. I'm just curious. The next 5 years, would you rather be GM of the Philadelphia 76ers or the Phoenix Suns?
Oof. I think 76ers.
Probably who I'd take too, which is pretty crazy. That's pretty absurd because they're in a bad spot, and somehow people think Phoenix is in a great spot. But I was thinking about that the other day. Like, I do not envy the position Daryl is in, even though he's made his own bed in a lot of ways. But even so, I would still rather not be the GM of Phoenix. That's what an awful job. All right, I'm ready to move on if you are.
Yeah,
Philly's
let's move
gotten
on to the
enough of
next
our
subject.
time.
But let us know in the comment section down below, what do you guys make of this whole situation with the 76ers and James Harden and Joel Embiid making his comments about James Harden? Let us know in the comment section down below. Please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Again, all that stuff helps us out tremendously, and we're looking forward to having your opinions and comments in the comment section of this recorded section of YouTube. We're actually live on Kick, so Kick is still up and kicking, no pun intended. But we will put this obviously on YouTube for anybody that was on YouTube that missed out on this video. They'll be able to catch that on there. So let us know in the comment section down below. All right, Pete, let us move on. And the thing we're going to move on to is, of course, talking about the Summer League. The Summer League is obviously the best time of year. It lets us kind of look at some of the players that we are interested in noticing, and players that we potentially could see in a uniform in the near future. There's a lot of players that impressed me the most on that I saw in Summer League. I think some of them, Pete, you already know who some of them are. But we're going to kind of go over our studs. I think that this is going to be a fun one to look after, and really kind of see like what guys we are noticing and which guys we think will who will improve their teams that they're on. So why don't you start off first, Pete? Like who's been like a stud that you've noticed in the NBA Summer League so far?
You want me to get right to my rant, Bernie, or should I hold it?
Is your rant included in this?
Yeah, it is. I mean, this is pretty directly, actually, because it has to do with a couple top 10 picks.
Yeah, sure. Let's hear this rant.
All right, here's my rant, Bernie. How we discussed this in depth, but I'm even more dumbfounded now. How, in any right universe of basketball, watching, fandom, anything, is it reasonable to go for fit over talent at the number 2 pick, Bernie. I cannot fathom skipping on Scoot Miller for Brandon or Scoot Henderson for Brandon Miller. I can't even
Miller, baby.
Can't even comprehend why you would think putting dude, it makes me so upset, Bernie. It makes me so upset. Scoot Miller, I just called him Scoot Miller again because you said it and you got it caught in my head like a song. Scoot Henderson. This dude is going to be a menace in the league for 15 years. There's not many guys that have looked like him at this age ever in NBA history. I mean, Bernie, he looks like some sort of combination between like young Derrick Rose and Chris Paul.
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily saying he's going to hit the highs of either of them. I think he will, personally. I'm not guaranteeing anything. But what I do guarantee is this. You have no culture in Charlotte. You have zero culture. There's none to speak of. You have new owners. You have a bad coach. You have, guys who are getting themselves in trouble off the court, guys who can't stay on the court. You have nothing to build from. And people like you, Bernie, this is where I'm going to come at you. This is my rant, all right? What has LaMelo shown anybody to think you should be building around him from these first 2 seasons? I get he's talented. I get it. He is certainly a solid offensive player at this point in his life. God dang it, dude. I keep calling him that. Scoot Henderson is better than LaMelo right now. He's better than him. And whether or not people agree with me on that front, I promise you he brings more to your culture than somebody like Brandon Miller does, or even LaMelo for that matter. Scoot is a foundational piece, Bernie. And I honestly think in 10 years, we're going to look back at this draft